Remote working was established to empower the office worker, to liberate them from the desk and set them free. Here in the UK, it's increased dramatically in recent years. So is it the future of work? Welcome to Roundtable. Hello, I'm Martin Stanford. Remote working is unshackling workers from office desks and helping businesses attract fresh talent. And official statistics show more and more of us are doing it. But is it always conducive to productivity?
The days of closed cubicles, quiet workspaces, and water cooler talk could be numbered. Staff and companies are demanding more flexible work environments. A physical office can be replaced by a digital one, thanks to technologies like video conference apps such as Skype and cloud collaboration software like Google Docs, Slack, and Trello. The plethora of smartphones, laptops, and tablets has led to a growing prevalence of Wi-Fi hotspots in public places. According to the UK's Office for National Statistics, more than 1.5 million people work from home for their main job, up from 884,000 10 years ago. More than two-thirds of people around the world work away from the office at least once every week. Allowing employees to work remotely can improve productivity, job satisfaction, and work-life balance. But critics argue that some firms haven't properly adapted the way they communicate to keep up with this shift. In 2017, internet giants IBM and Yahoo, early adopters of remote work, took the decision to call people back to the office, citing the need for teams to be in the same space to be successful. So is remote work really the future of work?
Time to introduce our guests. Joining us via Skype from Berlin is Mark Graham, Professor of Internet Geography at the Oxford Internet Institute. Here at the round table, we have Rajneesh Narula, who's an economist at the University of Reading, and Alex Hirst, CEO and co-founder of the Hoxby Collective, a community for remote workers. Mark Graham, let's go to you first. I think it's only appropriate we start a conversation about remote working by someone who's remote from us. Does it work for everyone?
Well, thanks for having me on remotely. Does it work for everyone? No. We have a lot of people who are remote working at the moment. Some people do remote work through employment contracts. They're employed. They have a job that allows them to have that sort of relationship. We have an increasing number of people who work remotely as flexible workers, so they don't work with employment contracts. And so these are quite precarious jobs. Some people thrive in that sort of setting, but a lot of people don't. And there are some structural dynamics that result in some negative outcomes for workers.
Let's just dwell on those just for a moment. For those who are used to maybe the office routine or going to work at a factory or an office at a set period of time, what do they miss if they go to this home working way of doing things?
Well, I think the key thing you miss is contact with other workers. You don't get the sort of community that you would have with other workers.
Professor Narula, I mean, water cooler moments, conversations as you go to the men's room or go and get something to eat at lunchtime, are they an important part of the world of work?
I think they are, because when people meet, they talk and they share ideas. They might have a comment about something, and it makes you think outside your own comfort zone. And I think this is the key thing about creativity. And creativity, of course, is the key thing in the knowledge economy. You want to have people thinking outside and bringing in ideas that don't actually belong to them, but come from other places. And it's easiest done, when the knowledge is tacit. That is to say, we're dealing with information that isn't codified. It's reading a book. I can ask you to outsource a particular activity to you. But then I want to integrate your ideas with mine. And they're very difficult to do without looking someone in the eye to see how you're reacting to what I'm saying. Are you absorbing what I'm picking up? How are you going to integrate this? And there's a lot of information that's being passed by looking you in the eye, as it were. or being able to sense your, your microaggression towards my whatever I might be saying.
I didn't realise I was being microaggressive then. I do apologise.
One never knows.
But they do say, business people I've interviewed in the past often say, in terms of the art of the deal, closing a deal, reaching a conclusion, reaching a collaboration, is best done face to face.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Completely, and I mean it's at so many levels that we I mean, think about it like spectacular failure of online dating in a way. I mean, it's good for business for people, but
failure. I thought it was runaway success.
It's a wonderful success for the companies, but then people you kiss 100 frogs to find one princess, so to speak. And it's because there's so little information. When you write things down, it's like, what do you say about yourself? How do you describe yourself? But it's very different from how I perceive you, how I perceive the information you're providing to me, what context you're providing it to me. And remote working removes some of these aspects of that information.
Right, let's turn to Alex, because despite all those potential criticisms or negatives, you've made it work. How have you done that?
So we started Hoxby with a vision to create a different business model, one that dispensed with traditional thinking, industrial age thinking, about having to be in a set place at a set time to do your work. So Hoxby works in a completely asynchronous fashion. So we are working 24/7 as a community, as a collective group of people, but everybody individually is only working the hours that they are happy to work, and they're doing that around the other things they've got going on in life. So we are quite fortunate, therefore, I think, to be digital first. And the way that we approach remote working is that it's for everyone. So everyone in Hoxby works under the same terms of engagement, if you like. And I think part of the problem that businesses have and the perception around remote working being isolating is because the business is divided. Some of the business is working in the office and some of the business is working remotely. And those remote workers are field attached.
They feel left out.
If they feel left out.
Yeah.
Naturally, because they don't know.
But you have a headquarters of some kind, don't you?
No, everything's online. No office.
There is no office?
There is no office. We don't need an office.
OK, so that's an extraordinary taking this to the degree. But you mentioned about productivity. This seems to be the very simple question to ask.
Yeah.
How can you be sure that your employees or your freelance contractors...
Yeah, we don't have any employees.
OK, all right. Your freelance contractors are actually delivering a reasonable amount of work for the money you're paying them?
Well, everything that they do is output-based, so they're not working on a time-based contract. They are committing to deliverables that our clients are also asking of us. So it's up to them to meet those deliverables and to be judged against the effectiveness of that work. So from our perspective, we're much happier, much more comfortable with that as a means of engagement than a time-based contract, which actually bears no connection to the quality of the work that they might deliver.
So give us a real-life example of a task that one of your colleagues might undertake.
A task might be to copyright an article for a brand that's going onto a website.
Right.
And what we would do is task the copywriter to write it, task a proofreader to proofread it. And this is where productivity gets really interesting, because we're using the right person for every task. We're not asking an employee to stretch out of their comfort zone and their capability to take on something because they happen to be the person that we've got in the office on an employment contract. So they might be quite inefficient at doing that. That's not to cast aspersions, but it's just to say what we're able to do is use the right person for every task. Because we are all connected and working in the same way online, everybody understands how they contribute to the overall success of any project. It's a very different way of thinking about structuring a business, to think of it as a community. So we have a community of over 800 people working across 30 countries, and what we do is draw on that community to create highly specialized teams that deliver work, rather than thinking about having a fixed employee base.
Mark Graham, from your point of view as an academic, then, looking at this kind of model, is it maybe that Alex has made it work for his group of professionals, but you would caution that it won't necessarily work for everyone?
It absolutely won't work for everyone, and I think it's somewhat irresponsible to imagine that it would. We can call these workers a community, but at the end of the day, they bargain individually, and we know that workers who bargain individually tend to have worse outcomes than workers who can bargain collectively. So we have labor market institutions for a reason. We have things like minimum wage laws for a reason, and we have employment contracts for a reason. These all exist to protect some of the most vulnerable workers that without those sorts of protections might earn less than a minimum wage. And so it's dangerous to start to structure the economy with ever more work flowing into these sorts of freelance contracts, because you don't have to pay a freelancer a minimum wage. If a freelancer gets sick, they don't get paid. If a freelancer becomes pregnant, they have no protections. And so we need to be careful about the amount of work that starts leaving the traditional employment model.
But are we not at risk of just holding on to the traditional because it already exists? If you were starting as an employer to draw up a schedule of what work you needed to get done in a certain amount of time today, you might not have an office building in central London or central Berlin or central Melbourne, would you?
Well, I think we can envision flexible work that still falls within some of the protections of the employment relationship. We don't need to think of employment and flexibility as two totally separate things. You can have remote work under an employment contract.
But one of the realities we're facing, without trying to confuse the topic too much, is of course the world of work is changing, and whatever it was, a 40-hour week, 45-hour week, 55-hour week, may cease to exist. Certainly for my children, as they grow up through their 20s and 30s, they're going to have multiple jobs, and one job only may require them to do 4 hours effort per week, say. That's likely. It's something we're going to have to grapple with, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've done a lot of researches with online freelancers around the world, and one of the things that was common amongst freelancers that we spoke to was a lot of these workers are willing to put in 60-hour weeks, 70-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks in some cases, because of the precarity of this sort of work. People don't get it in nicely spread out 37.5-hour week chunks. When you get the work, you do it, and when you don't have the work, then you worry about where your income is going to come from. And so that I'm not sure that's a future of work that most people actually want.
Doesn't sound particularly attractive. Alex, how do you mitigate against exploitative pressures then by saying, come on, I need this, and this is a really important thing, I want you to do it, and suddenly somebody's working a 60, 70-hour week, maybe against their choice?
So I think the first thing to say is that that example is working on the assumption of the current system, where a freelancer is an incremental resource to a traditional employee. So it's a different competitive landscape. You're
asking us to think in a different way.
Think forward, think into our world, where Hoxby's have a portfolio career whereby working within Hoxby is just a component part of the way they make a living. So there are different ways to make a living, and the increasing trend towards portfolio working would suggest that actually employment may need to take on a different form. Certainly, people are looking to use more of their whole self, more of their whole capability to bring variety into the way they work. So I think there are challenges today with the way we perceive how work should be done and the way that freelancers are treated. But I think that is different from what we're trying to imagine as a future of work, where work is a lot more evenly distributed and made available to more people. Remote working enables a lot of work for people too. People who can't get to an office for whatever reason, for physical health conditions, mental health reasons, whether they've got caring responsibilities and that sort of thing. So we mustn't forget that there's a great number of people who can't engage with the current employment system and represent those people.
Professor Narula, many people, of course, if you like, have to work as a means to an end. They want to earn some money to look after their friends and their family. In this world where you're working remotely, isn't there a risk that people will work too hard to try and earn that extra dollar, that extra euro?
Well, there are two different perspectives, that of the employer and that of the employee, and I think that was what Mark was trying to bring up earlier on. From the point of view of the employee, there are pluses and minuses. That is, you can work flexibly around your commitments, being a carer or whatever. But there also you lose the advantage of having any control over your income and your conditions of your employment.
And that would be a source of worry, wouldn't it?
Yes, that would be. I mean, I'll give you an example. The drivers who drop off stuff for Amazon, they get paid 45 pence a delivery, not a per hour amount. They get paid 45 pence. Now, if you want to make a minimum wage, you have to deliver something like 20 packages in an hour, which is a package every few minutes. And if you don't do that, you're making less than minimum wage. Of course, they are accepting an assignment on a modular basis. That is, each unit is getting them 45 pence. They're not. The company hasn't. They're not employees of anyone. So while they have employment, they have opportunities which they might not have had otherwise. They also suffer that they fall betwixt the cracks, as it were. They're not unemployed and they're not employed, and that's a problem. But then, if you look at it from the other side from the firm's point of view, the company, the employers, on the one hand, you're getting stuff done cheaper. On the other hand, you have no loyalty. You have no team spirit. You have no organizational synergies coming from people talking to each other. If you go to a hospital, I mean, people have to be there. People, you need to have nurses, doctors talking to each other. You have studio, where we are right now, where everybody engages. And these require teamwork. And teamwork is something that people need to feel part of a team and part of a family, which means spending the money to make them feel like, oh, I don't have to rush off and do another job on the gig economy just to make ends meet.
You see, I'll come back to Alex in a minute, because you mentioned, I think, something about it's good for your mental health because you're more chilled, you're doing things on your own terms. But could I ask you, is it really good for your mental health? Because aren't you potentially more anxious? You're worried about whether you're going to earn enough money tomorrow or today. And you are perhaps missing out on that sense of a common purpose.
I think so. I mean, it's not an area of my research, but I do feel that when you don't know how long, whether you're going to have a gig in the next month, and whether should you take a holiday just in case a job comes in, or if a job comes in, you decide to cancel your holidays, and so on. These are big issues.
Well, that's not good for your well-being,
no,
is it really?
Isn't.
So how do you deal with that side of things?
Well, so we've been working this way for 4 years, and I can tell you that the culture within our community that exists entirely online is unlike anything I've seen before. And it comes back to your point about having a common purpose. So if people are united behind a direction and understand why they are working within a specific environment, that's what drives performance. What is a business or an organization if not a group of people trying to achieve something together? Yeah. So that transcends bricks and mortar and time zones. There is no need to be in the same room at the same time to share in a purpose and to be part of something. So we have a culture that's built around enabling flexibility for each other, and every Hoxby signs up to that. But we also have a structure that is designed to give people not only the freedom to choose when and where they work, but also the sense of connectedness that they're working together. So online, we have a community of 800 people. We have a water cooler, and they have probably...
You have an online water cooler?
Yeah. So
okay, let me explain that.
So Slack is a technology that we use. Slack enables you to center conversations around a specific subject area. So we have...
But the downside of that is just people are idly gossiping over Slack, and they're not actually doing any work at all.
But they're being judged by their output, so it's up to them how much time they spend gossiping, And also, who's to say when, if it suits them to have water cooler conversations, they could have water cooler conversations for hours on end, because they can do their work at the time that suits them too. But the point being that we center conversations around a myriad of subject things, areas that people are interested in. And actually what they get from that is the perspectives of hundreds of people fed to them at a time that's convenient to them. Not a passing chat at a water cooler for a couple of minutes, which is what we would get in a traditional work environment. So actually the opportunity for enrichment and to connect with people is far, far greater online when you start to leverage the power of the collective.
Professor Graham, are you persuaded that online water cooler could be just, if not better, than the real thing?
No.
I thought not.
I think it's important to remember all of the big online freelancing companies, all of the companies in the gig economy, what they do, the model is designed to put all of the risk of doing business onto the worker. So this this doesn't lead to a situation in which workers are building communities or collectives with one another. It leads to a situation in which workers are competing with one another. If you look at the big online freelancing sites like freelancer.com, upwork.com, you have a situation where you have way more workers signed up than you have jobs. And so workers from around the world compete with one another for those jobs. And this drives down wages, it drives down working conditions. Those workers absolutely do not see themselves as a community. And they know very well that they aren't able to charge the rates in most cases that they want to charge. They have to charge the rates that the market allows them to charge.
It goes to a minimum rather than to a maximum way of earning money.
Exactly, and because you have workers from around the world competing with one another, and because none of these workers are protected by local labor regulations like minimum wages, you can get situations where workers are working for below the effective local minimum wage.
Okay, I'll give you a chance, Alex, to respond from your particular point of view.
I think that's a really good point. Intermediary models are not what we are. So intermediary models are around today, and it is a race to the bottom. Averagely, 3% of members of those communities get paid work. So in any one time.
This is like the freelancer agencies you're talking about.
Yeah. And
but you're telling us you're not like that.
We are absolutely
you're
not
different.
that. We are an organisational design that is the next stage beyond that.
Yes.
It's about connected freelance talent, delivering a collective goal. And so just to that point, we have anywhere between 30 and 50% of our community in paid work at any time. So although it is a different model, it's much more in between freelance and employment than the traditional intermediary is.
Right, so the expectations are there.
Yeah.
So, somebody who signs up to the Hoxby deal can have a realistic idea of the sort of level of earnings they will be able to achieve.
They can, but we don't make any commitments around that because it's about individual availability, and we expect Hoxby to be part of their career, and we make it very, very clear that Hoxby is just one of a number of income streams that they might have.
Professor Narula, I've noticed that IBM and Yahoo, one of those big tech giants, two of them have stopped all this remote working. They were some of the earliest to give people a laptop and an internet connection at home. Now they've found actually it works better to bring them back in the office.
I think the tide has turned to some extent in the large organizations, exactly for this reason that you get much more when you have a sense of community, you have a sense of belonging. But most importantly, people talk. And the amount of information that is being exchanged by people, even in a casual over lunch type of thing where, and you say, I did not know that. And this.
So those little serendipitous moments are useful.
Precisely.
But I've also read there's a lot of data to say that one of the curses of office life is the meeting. We've got to go to this meeting. Meetings, I don't know if we can all agree this, are incredibly inefficient and mostly a waste of time. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't say they're always a waste of time. You do need to come up to a consensus when making a decision. Otherwise, you get this autocratic organizational structure. And especially for creative, I do a lot of research on innovation and R&D. And, there are people with different visions of the same thing. Now, you can't have 5 different leaders, coming up with 5 different brilliant ideas. They're all brilliant people in their own right. How do you come to one single design that meets everyone's satisfaction? You cannot avoid the meeting.
No, decisions have to be taken. Yes. I appreciate that. And Mark Graham, is there something that technology can help us with meetings? I mean, do they have to be the tedium they often are?
I've yet to find that solution.
What do you think, Alex?
We don't have meetings.
You don't have meetings?
No.
This is a way forward. So how do you ever get any kind of distribution of information through a team or through the whole company?
Our community exchange is around 10,000 messages a week. So to the point about picking up idle conversations, I hear idle conversations from hundreds of people every day. It's like my ability to...
Surprised you get any work done.
Well, I just read through. I mean, I don't read it all. And that's the point. I have to self-select what I choose to read and listen to. But we are asynchronous. So we don't work on the assumption that we all have to be in the same room at the same time. Yeah. So that means we can't have meetings, and we don't expect to have meetings. What we expect is to have an ongoing conversation. So within each channel that is essentially a subject area, we'll talk about it. People will contribute their opinion around their own work style and when they can. So that means we're not chained to a meeting time. What I would say to the point around face-to-face collaboration is I think there is value in face-to-face collaboration. I should say that. The Hoxbys get together locally to meet and socialise and chat in their own environments.
You do allow them to actually, be in the same room.
Absolutely, they love each other. They're great friends.
It's not banned.
No, not at all. In fact, it's actively encouraged. We arrange meetups for them to get together, to meet, chat, work together, co-work, wherever they are, because we appreciate the value of human interaction. However, the important difference here is that they are choosing to be there. They're choosing to meet each other, A, because they want to meet each other, because they enjoy it, but also B, if they're having a meeting and they're attending a meeting, it's because they really want to be there. That's a choice.
Not because
they're in the same room and it's because of the way they understand how work should be done.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you then, and remember you can see more of a discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. You just search for TRT World Roundtable. But for now, from me and all the team here, goodbye. Thank you for watching.